Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. And welcome back to the channel. Today I'm in a Porsche 911. More specifically, I'm in a 996 911 Turbo. That's the key word here, turbo. That means I've got over 400 horsepower and I can go from 0 to 60 in around 4 seconds. I'll be honest with you at this point, I'm not a huge 911 fan. I never have been. These cars have never really been on my radar. In fact, I've never even driven a 996 911 before. This is my very first going one. So my very first drive of a 911 is in a 911 Turbo, which I know is a little bit like, it's like having never been horse riding and then jumping straight onto the back of Red Rum. Or taking your very first flight somewhere on holiday on Concorde. Anyway, enough of the analogies for now, let's get going. So the Porsche 911's been around since 1963. By the way, I know some of you will take issue with how I say Porsche and the fact that I don't say Porsche, but I just can't bring myself to say it. It just sounds kind of pretentious, don't you think, saying Porsche? The hairs on the back of my neck have just stood up when I said it. Anyway, so the Porsche 911's been around since 1963, and it's always been air-cooled until they launched the 996 model in 1997. Lots of Porsche purists weren't happy with the 996, because they thought it was a step too far. They changed the body shape way too much, and they made the engine cooled by water rather than oxygen. They also didn't like the fried egg style headlamps. The engine was a 3.4 litre flat 6. The turbo model got a 3.6 litre flat 6. Crucially, the turbo model was the only 996 that didn't suffer from the IMS bearing fault that all the other 996s did, but anyway, I'll get onto that later. The 996 was released for the 1998 model year, and it ran all the way to 2005, when it was replaced with the 997. The turbo model wasn't released until 2001. The turbo model gets all-wheel drive and twin turbos, which reduces the turbo lag, which was quite common on previous 911s. This 3.6 litre engine in the turbo was derived from the Porsche GT1 race car, which won Le Mans. This one has a 5-speed automatic gearbox with paddles on the steering wheel, but you could also have opted for the 6-speed manual. The turbo has a much wider, much lower, much stockier appearance, which I think looks fantastic. I do quite like the standard sleek design of just a standard Carrera, but there's something about the wide-bodied turbo. Looks all aggressive and menacing, a bit like Ray Winston. Just looks like it's up for a fight all the time, like it's up for a brawl. I'm just approaching the dual carriageway now, so I'm going to put my foot down now in a 911 Turbo for the very first time and see. Oh, I really wasn't expecting that. Have I gone pale? I think I've gone white. This is brutal. Gotta slow down. I've gone all hot. This is supercar quick. But I'm now sitting at 70 miles an hour and it's quite civilised. You do get quite a bit of noise, so I find myself having to speak louder, but then for that sort of performance I can live with that. Let's try that again. So, I'm approaching the dual carriageway, foot on the accelerator. So yeah, it's a 911 Turbo. I don't know why I was so surprised at its performance. Obviously it was going to be quick. You put 420 horsepower in a car that weighs the same as a Ford Focus and you will get results. This is a 2003 car, and back in 2003 it cost £98,000, which is a huge sum of money. It would have bought you a terraced house somewhere. In fact, it'd still buy you a terraced house somewhere. So the first owner must have had a few quid, because in addition to its £98,000 price, this one's also got quite a few optional extras. I've got a sunroof, I've got Bose audio, I've got cup holders, leather seats. The interior of the 996 always got a bad rep, and now I'm sat in one. I don't know why. Of course, it does feel a little bit dated because it's nearly 17 years old, but the quality of it just shines through. There aren't too many shiny, cheap plastics. You've got leather everywhere. I've got a nice suede headlining. You get thick carpets here on the door cards. And that's the thing with Porsches. The quality is just excellent. The quality of the leather on the seats is superb. I mean, they look like they've barely been sat in. The seats are very soft and supple, but also very supportive. They've got the balance just right. It still feels like quite a special place to be. At some point, one of the car's previous owners has put this different style steering wheel on it with a flat bottom, but it does feel nice and chunky. There's something about driving a Porsche. You just look down and see the Stuttgart badge on the steering wheel and remember that you're in a premium product. Anyway, I don't know why the interior gets such a bad rep. It's very early noughties, admittedly, but that's when the car was created, so you can't hold that against it. I mean, look, you even get Gordon Gekko's telephone. How cool's that? It's all very Wolf of Wall Street in here. You can imagine jumping in this after a long day of buying and selling stocks and shares, and then heading that evening to a party where you'll consume lots of champagne and cocaine, probably. The performance is just overwhelming, really. I looked through the paperwork and this car was first registered in Essex, which makes perfect sense because it's a very Essex car. Driving it around today, as much as I've enjoyed it, you do feel very self-conscious in this. You get lots of looks, and it doesn't really make you feel successful in a good way, like a Range Rover or a Bentley does. It just makes you feel like a rich banker or drug dealer. Yes, I said banker with a B. Bravo, not whiskey. I'm not a huge fan of the noise it makes. It's not a nice V8 or V10 sound. It's just a noise. But it handles beautifully. It feels dainty and agile and light on its feet. I think the steering's weighted perfectly. And this being the all-wheel drive model, on these twisty roads at this time of year with loads of wet leaves around, it just sticks to the road perfectly. One slight criticism though, the pedals I think are too close together. I keep finding myself pressing the brake but also still having my foot on the accelerator. You'd have to have the feet of a ballerina to find these pedals practical. The most common issue with the 996 Porsche, which I'm sure you're all aware of, is the IMS bearing failure. It was a design flaw basically, and it affects less than 10% of all 996s ever made. As I said before, it doesn't affect the turbo model, but it does affect every other 996, or can potentially affect every other 996. But you know what, that wouldn't put me off buying one, because without sounding like a naive optimist, they're now 16, 17, 18 years old. It's probably had it replaced. And if you find one that hasn't, you can replace those bearings for around 1,500 quid. And if you're the kind of person who's put off by a potential £1,500 bill, then you really didn't ought to be buying an old 911. By the way, today I've averaged 21.1 miles per gallon. Pretty good, isn't it? I would never tire of this car. So let's talk about price. As I say, this is a 2003 car, done 76,000 miles, and when it was new it cost £98,000. Today you could buy this car for around £35,000. I know it's a lot of money, but it is a lot of car. But if you don't want a turbo model, or your budget can't stretch to a turbo, you can pick up a 996, a nice Carrera or Carrera 4, for around £10,000, which is much easier to stomach. And it's an affordable way into 911 ownership. You can pick up a cheap high mileage turbo for around £25,000, but as I say, you might be best buying a good, well looked after one rather than a cheap one. I do like the fact that this is the turbo model. I like the badge on the back, I like the wide stance and the flared arches, and the performance. It just gives you all that power all in one lump. So if you're looking to buy one, make sure it's got full service history. That kind of goes without saying. But not just that, make sure it's got either full Porsche service history or Porsche specialist service history. You want to know that this is being maintained properly. One of the issues I have with the 911 is that it's referred to as a supercar, and although the turbo model does have supercar performance, I would never describe it to anybody as a supercar, because it just doesn't have the flair of a Ferrari or something. I mean, back in 2003 when this came out, calling it a supercar would be comparing it to a Ferrari 360 or a Lamborghini Gallardo, and I just wouldn't put them in the same league. I think what it is an excellent sports car, there's no denying that, Definitely no denying that. But yeah, supercar, no, I don't think so. I think it's just too clinical for me, or too clinical to be a supercar. Supercars have got to be a bit mad, haven't they? And this one, although it's very quick, still feels quite sensible. One thing the turbo model does have in common though with other supercars is that it makes the driver look like an arrogant so-and-so. People call it the best everyday supercar. Is that really what you want? If you're in the market for a supercar, do you want it to be an everyday thing? I wouldn't. I'd want it to be locked away in a garage and only taken out at weekends. That's the whole point of a supercar. I personally would want my supercar to be a bit more super. I wouldn't want to use it every day. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, it's kind of horses for courses, isn't it? But that's just what I think. I think the fact that it's all-wheel drive does take a little bit of the fun away, because on these roads you would like to get a little bit of oversteer, wouldn't you? So thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them below and I'll do my best to get back to you. So I'm now at 25,000 subscribers, so I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who's subscribed, and if you haven't, make sure you do. So yeah, until next time, I'll see you around. Cheers guys, thanks for watching.